Well, good morning, everyone. Before I forget, I was at a pupil this morning who was saying that they sometimes get notifications of stuff, of videos that that they've subscribed to the channel, and sometimes they don't. And I know sometimes people have said, why have I not received any notification of this? So just in case it is as simple as this, let me just show you this real quick once. This is, let's just do this. Let's make sure that everything's working as it should. That seems to be. When you subscribe to YouTube channels such as Charlie Berens, and why wouldn't you want to subscribe to Charlie Berens' channel? So there I am. I'm subscribed to Charlie's channel. Subscribed. The bell at the side has got three options. None, personalized. It means it sends you notifications sometimes, and then click on that one. Again, click on all, and you'll get all notifications. I must admit, I don't have my notifications set to all on every channel that I'm subscribed to, because there's probably about 70, and you would be constantly being inundated with the notifications. So that might be the problem. It certainly was as far as this morning's pupil was. He wanted the Scottish rugby channel, and when we noticed that he was subscribed to the channel but not to the receiving all the notifications, hopefully that'll sort that out. Okay. Yesterday evening, last night, had a few exchanges once again with cartoon character. This time I didn't delete them because other people had joined in on comments, so I wanted to leave that so that other people can engage. And I, as I've always said to guilters, why are you telling us about how guilty Steve and Brendan are? Do yourself a favour. Get in touch with Kathleen Zellner. If you can prove that Stephen's guilty, she'll pay you $10,000. So I just asked the question of cartoon character, what did you spend? How much birdseed were you able to buy with $10,000? Rather tongue-in-cheek, I suggested that that amount of birdseed, you must be rather constipated. But then the conversation got a little bit more sensible when I asked about, simple question: do wrongful convictions occur? And even more simple question, what would be the telltale signs of a false confession and a wrongful conviction? And cartoon character acknowledged that yes, they do occur, and even in the UK, they happen throughout the world. Cartoon character, but then, and this video is for your benefit, by the way, cartoon character. You wrote, I have no idea what the telltale signs would be. I don't think you've been watching enough videos. Anyway, in order to help enlighten cartoon character, here we go. This is, and I'll post the link in the comments, in the description below, the link to this document. This, of course, is the en banc 7th Circuit en banc decision. And if you go to page 40, you'll bypass the nonsense by Judge Hamilton. And let's just go straight in with the dissenting opinion. Just do that. Yep, they're all looking good. Of Chief Judge Wood and Rovner and Williams. I'm pretty certain that it's Chief Judge Wood that is writing this, but if it was Rovner or Williams, I do apologise. But they are circuit judges dissenting. Psychological coercion, questions to which the police furnished the answers, and ghoulish games of 20 questions in which Brendan Dassey guessed over and over again before he landed on the, quote, correct story, that is to say, the one the police wanted, led to the so-called confession that furnished the only serious evidence supporting his murder conviction in the Wisconsin courts. Interesting. Turning a blind eye to these glaring faults, the en banc majority has decided to deny Dassey's petition for a writ of habeas corpus. They justify this travesty of justice as something compelled by the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act. If the writ, as limited by EDPA, were nothing more than a dead letter, perhaps they would be correct. But it is not. Instead, as the Supreme Court wrote in Harrington versus Richter, the writ of habeas corpus stands as a safeguard against imprisonment of those held in violation of the law. It is, the court went on to say, a guard against extreme malfunctions in the state criminal justice systems. As the district court and the panel majority recognised, we have before us just such an extreme malfunction. Brendan, at the relevant time, being 16 years old and had an IQ in the low 80s, his confession was coerced, and thus it should not have been admitted into evidence. Cartoon character, you can call me what you want, you can go on about, my hair or my beard or my teeth or what shirt I've got on, how tall, how short, how heavy I am, the fact that I'm white, the fact that I'm from Scotland. This is a judge. This is one of the top judges in the country. She is a judge on the 7th Circuit. She is telling you why Brendan Dassey's confession was coerced. These are the telltale signs you look for. His confession was coerced. That's not that. Now I'm reading that out aloud, but I'm reading what Judge Wood has said, okay? Just to make that clear. His confession was coerced, and thus it should not have been admitted into evidence. And even if we were to overlook the coercion, that's interesting, overlook the coercion part of it, the confession itself is so riddled with input from the police that its violates due process. Now, I must admit, this business of overlooking the coercion, I'm reading, as some of you will know at the moment, an absolutely brilliant book by Richard Leo called police interrogation and American justice. And the first 70 odd pages deal with, in particular, with the history of coercion, going way back to, for example, in the 1930s, there was a Wickersham report, which detailed basically the use of torture, what they called the third degree, to get confessions out of people. And it's fascinating this whole first start of the part of the history of coerced confessions. I'm hoping to be able to get Professor Richard Leo back on again sometime after Christmas. And definitely we'll look in a little bit more detail at coercion and the history of coercion. As I say, the confession itself, even putting aside the fact that it was so clearly coerced, yes, there was no shouting. Yes, there was no third degree. Psychologically, it's far more effective to use psychological coercion. But the confession itself is riddled with input from the police that its use violates due process. Now, Brendan will, if this wrongful conviction can't be overturned, will spend the rest of his life in prison because of the injustice this court has decided to leave unredressed. I respectfully dissent. As the Wisconsin Court of Appeals correctly noted, the question whether a confession is voluntary, i.e. not coerced, is assessed in light of the totality of the circumstances. The age and sophistication of the person being questioned are critical factors. When the suspect is a minor, courts must review the confession and record with special care. Courts also must take the suspect's intellectual capacity into account. Dassey, as the majority concedes, was a mentally limited 16-year-old. It was thus incumbent on the state courts to evaluate his confession in light of those traits. The Wisconsin courts failed to take this essential step. When asked at oral argument where one might find evidence that the state appellate court took the required special care, counsel for the state came up dry. All counsel could do was to point out a brief mention in the state court's opinion of Dassey's age and mental capabilities. But so what? The Supreme Court has never said or implied that the totality of the circumstances are beside the point as long as the state court simply jots down a fact without a hint about if or how that fact influenced the outcome. There is nothing special or even meaningful about a naked word on a page. The reader has no idea whether the state court mentioned the word meaning to indicate that it found the factor irrelevant, which would have been inconsistent with the clear Supreme Court precedent listed above, or exculpatory or damning. Notably, even though the Wisconsin Court of Appeals gave a nod to the totality test, it made no mention of the special care standard for juvenile confessions. What that means, cartoon character, is it's discovered that, children, because that's what Brendan's mental age was, are far more susceptible to just agreeing with interrogators. They want to comply with their in effect their demands, and when they come up with a story that they want you to follow and you say yes, then you might even get to hand in your project in the 6th hour. You cannot take a confession like Brendan's as being comparable to somebody, an adult who's had far more experience. As I say, the figures are there to prove it, that younger people confess at a far greater rate than adults. To be sure, Harrington versus Richter holds generally that federal courts may not draw any dispositive conclusions from a state's court silence. But by the same token, the state court's silence cannot be leveraged into any assurance that the court went the extra mile required by the US Supreme Court and gave Dassey's age and limited mental ability particularized care. The majority's finding to the contrary has no support in the record. Worse, the majority writes off in a footnote Dassey's extreme suggestibility by casting doubt on the applicability of a formal test. As the painstaking review of the record reflected in Judge Rovner's panel opinion reveals, even a lay person could see readily that Dassey yielded to any suggestion the person in authority made. That cartoon character is a really good telltale sign that you're getting a false confession. Now, more generally, no court is entitled to pick and choose which bits of evidence to consider when evaluating the totality of the circumstances. Clearly established US Supreme Court decisions compelled the Wisconsin court to pay special attention to Dassey's age and intellectual abilities, including his high level of suggestibility. Its failure to do so is one reason why it erroneously concluded that Dassey's confession was not coerced. If the Wisconsin Court of Appeals had done what it should have, it could not reasonably have concluded that Brendan's confession was either voluntary or reliable, both of which are required for the use of a confession to be consistent with due process. Nevertheless, first the state and now the en banc majority have culled a sentence here and there and have attempted to craft a coherent confession from them. Now, again, cartoon character, the video recording of the police interrogation of Dassey, however, tells another story, one that is diametrically opposed to the state's tidy and selective summary. Among the many red flags are the following. Obviously, Brendan's answers to questions frequently changed at the detectives' prodding. When they weren't happy with one aspect of the question, ask him again, feed him the details as well. The officers laid a trail of crumbs. That'll be now that might get you excited, birdseed crumbs, but try and pay attention, okay, because this is important. Indeed, large signposts to the confession they sought. Whenever Brendan went off course, the investigators would shepherd him back in the desired direction, at times with the use of fatherly assurances and gestures, and frequently by questioning his honesty. On both February 27th and March 1st, the detectives misleadingly conveyed to Dassey, whose ability to think abstractly was minimal, that his, quote, honesty was the, quote, only thing that will set him free. Through subsequent questioning, it became clear that honesty meant what the investigators wanted to hear. Brendan's age and mental limitations made him particularly susceptible to this psychologically manipulative interrogation. Many of the officer's tactics appeared to be drawn from the Reed technique, which was for some time the most widely used interrogation protocol in the country. I think we'll leave it there. Cartoon character. Really, it's not difficult to see when a confession has been coerced. It really isn't. To see when we have a completely false confession. Anyway, cartoon character, I hope that has helped you in some way to understanding a little bit more about the case. Let's just see who's all here this morning. Dr. Millbilly, hi there. Jazz, Kim, Paul, hi Paul. Jazz, Alice, and okay, Dawn, hi. Paul, okay, Dawn. JD, Sean, hi Sean. And Alice, Jazz, Millbilly, JD, I think all the usual suspects, Sean, JD, Paul. Yep, well, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We'll have a look at the next part at some point of that, just the dissenting opinion from Judge Wood. As I say, don't cartoon character, don't just take it that Brendan is innocent because I'm saying so. No, that's it's not what it's all about. It's this is a judge, and I think what really strikes people about the Seventh Circuit en banc decision was how far apart the judges are on their opinions. Judge Hamilton was quite happy to accept all of the cognitive dissonance that Luke Berg talked about. This idea that, the reason why he couldn't remember the fact that she had been shot in the head was because they were talking about it being in the trailer, but that happened in the garage. If Brendan had seen anybody shot in the head, he would have remembered it. He would have had nightmares about it. All of what happened. And I suppose that's the main point, is the fact that when you've got two sides who are so against one another, that creates huge reasonable doubt. And we're talking about when you add up the fact that Judge Duffin voted, was the one that originally granted the writ of habeas corpus. Then you had the Seventh Circuit, just the three-judge panel, and that went 2-1, and this one went 4-3. It just shows how much there's conflict there between the judges. On the one hand, you've got the ones that are sticking up for the state. Maybe they're doing it for the practical reasons of, they really don't want Stephen Brendan being released because it's going to cause huge problems. The end justifies the means. But certainly, I think even cartoon character, you can accept that when you have reasonable doubt, then you should not convict. Anyway, as I say, I'll see you all later. Catch up with you all soon. Bye for now.